Hello and welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to discuss the quintessential cards needed to build the core of a Planeswalker commander deck with Kenrith the Returned King as its general. Kenrith the Returned King was the buy-a-box promo card for Magic's powerful and flavorful fairy tale set, Throne of Eldraine. Through his 5-color identity, Kenny can be called upon to be the general for any commander brew imaginable. If it can be built, then he can command it. As a creature, Kenny is a 5/5 legendary human noble for 4 and 1 white mana. As a toolbox, his litany of activated abilities include, for 1 red mana, all creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. For 1 and 1 green mana, we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. For 2 and 1 white mana, target player gains 5 life. For 3 and 1 blue mana, target player draws a card. And for 4 and 1 black mana, we put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. All of these abilities are functional and relevant, and in addition to his 5-color identity, are the reasons why Kenrith the Returned King is the single most versatile commander option in Magic. So in this video, we are going to craft the core of a Planeswalker EDH deck with Kenrith the Returned King as the general. We are not going to choose any Planeswalkers around which to build. Instead, we'll leave the recruitment process up to you while we showcase a core of support cards that will empower and enhance whichever Planeswalkers you choose. We begin the core of this build with cards that put Planeswalkers into our hand from our library. Call the Gatewatch is a Planeswalker-specific tutor, while Ignite the Beacon is the same, but can tutor up to 2 of them at instant speed. When Jeru with Eyes Open enters the battlefield, we may search our library for a Planeswalker card, reveal it, and put it into our hand. Although it's limited to the top 3 cards of our library, Oath of Nissa can put a Planeswalker, creature, or land card into our hand when it comes into play. Although this is a decent card advantage effect, this enchantment's true power lies in its ability to spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast our Planeswalker spells. This effectively fixes the mana base for casting the Planeswalker spells in our 5-color build for the meager investment of just 1 green mana. We continue the core of this build with options to cheat our Planeswalkers onto the battlefield. Oath of Ajani reduces the cost of our Planeswalker spells by 1, which helps to cheat them into play ahead of curve. It also puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control when it enters the battlefield. When Arena Rector dies, we may exile it, and if we do, then we search our library for a Planeswalker card and put it onto the battlefield. Deploy the Gatewatch allows us to look at the top 7 cards of our library and put up to 2 Planeswalker cards from among them onto the battlefield. For repeatable ways of cheating Planeswalkers into play, we can cast Thran Temporal Gateway. We can pay for and tap this legendary artifact and put a historic permanent card from our hand onto the battlefield. Historic cards are artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. And of course, Planeswalkers are legendary. Since the majority of the most powerful Planeswalkers have mana values north of 4, using this artifact to cheat them into play well ahead of curve could be devastating to our opponents. Another option is the Prismatic Bridge, which is the backside of Asika, God of the Tree. With this Set It But Don't Forget It enchantment, we reveal cards from the top of our library at the beginning of our upkeep until we reveal a creature or a Planeswalker. Then we put that card onto the battlefield. Since the core of this Planeswalker build is optimized to synergize with all things Planeswalkers, revealing a creature card first should not hinder us. They're deliberately included for their interaction with our Planeswalkers, as we'll see later in this video. Once we have a bevy of Planeswalkers on our side of the battlefield, we will want to activate their various abilities as much as possible. Rings of Brighthearth provides a way for us to copy a Planeswalker's loyalty ability by paying 2 mana. The Chain Veil takes it up a notch. We can pay for and tap it to activate loyalty abilities of planeswalkers we control once this turn, as though none of its loyalty abilities have been activated this turn. The slight drawback of potentially losing 2 life if we were unable to activate a loyalty ability during our turn is of no consequence. Remember, we begin the game with 40 life. For another set it but don't forget it enchantment, Oath of Teferi lets us activate loyalty abilities of planeswalkers we control twice each turn rather than only once. As a bonus, it blinks another target permanent we control when it enters the battlefield, which, of course, is a great way to reuse an ETB trigger or reset the loyalty of a planeswalker we control. Now let's talk about some cards that put loyalty counters on our planeswalkers so that we can activate their ultimate abilities as soon as possible. At the beginning of our end step, Broker's Ascendancy puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control and a loyalty counter on each planeswalker we control. When Oath of Gideon enters the battlefield, we create 2 1/1 white core ally creature tokens, and whenever a planeswalker enters the battlefield under our control, it does so with an additional loyalty counter. Pure Imaginative Rascal puts an additional counter on a permanent we control when 1 or more counters are placed on that permanent. Lae'zel, Vlaakith's champion, mimics this effect, but restricts it to counters placed on creatures, planeswalkers, or ourselves. Each time we activate an ability of one of our planeswalkers, Karth the Lion puts a loyalty counter on that planeswalker. As a bonus, whenever he enters the battlefield or a planeswalker we control dies, we look at the top 7 cards of our library. We may reveal a planeswalker card from among them and put it into our hand. Mila, Crafty Companion, makes our opponents think twice about attacking any of our planeswalkers. Whenever an opponent does, we put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker we control. As a bonus, whenever a permanent we control becomes a target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, we may draw a card. As another bonus, the backside of Mila is Luca, Wayward Bonder, who enters with 5 loyalty for 4 and 2 red mana. He provides card advantage, creature recursion, and a War Storm Surge effect through his emblem. Proliferation is a mechanic that lets a player choose any number of permanents and or players, and then gives them each another counter of each kind already there. Through Proliferation, we can put loyalty counters onto our planeswalkers and activate their ultimate abilities ahead of curve. Secondary to implementing a Proliferation theme into a planeswalker deck, Ichor Moon Gauntlet and Tekythal Inquiry Dominus are as close to auto-includes as auto-includes can get. Ichor Moon Gauntlet gives planeswalkers we control a proliferate ability for 0 loyalty and an extra turn ability for 12. Strengthening this proliferation strategy even further, whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we choose a counter on target permanent and put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. This artifact can be considered a win condition, as well as the catalyst to many planeswalker combos. Ichor Moon Gauntlet is card number 1 to add to any planeswalker build. Whenever we proliferate, Tekythal allows us to proliferate twice instead. As a bonus, we can pay 1 and 2 blue Phyrexian mana and remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers we control to put an indestructible counter onto this Phyrexian horror. A 3/5 flying and indestructible creature that doubles our proliferation effects? Yes, yes, and yes again. Continuing with our proliferation package, Evolution Sage rewards us by engaging in a fundamental aspect of the game, playing lands. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we proliferate. We proliferate through Flux Channeler whenever we cast a non-creature spell, while Inexorable Tide extends this effect to whenever we cast any spell. Whenever Thrumming Bird deals combat damage to a player, we proliferate, and since it has flying, we should be able to find an opponent without adequate blockers to do so. We can pay for and tap Karn's Bastion to do the same, while Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, has a beginning of our end step proliferate trigger attached to the body of a 4/4 with flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink. There are options to put loyalty counters onto our planeswalkers even more quickly. Doubling Season lets us put twice as many counters onto a permanent we control whenever an effect puts one or more counters onto that permanent. A Planeswalker coming into play and under our control, with Doubling Season on our side of the battlefield, will enter play with twice its starting loyalty. For some Planeswalkers, this means that their ultimate abilities can be activated the turn they come into play. As a bonus, if an effect would create one or more tokens under our control, Doubling Season creates twice that many tokens instead. There are numerous Planeswalkers that have loyalty abilities that create tokens, and with Doubling Season, we'll create double the number of those tokens instead. Vorinclex Monstrous Raider has the same Doubling Season counter effect, but also extends it to counters placed on players as well. Vorinclex also halves the number of counters an opponent could place onto a permanent or a player, rounded down. This ability weakens the starting loyalty of our opponent's Planeswalkers, as well as their ability to put loyalty counters on them. Vorinclex also slows down our opponent's +1/+1 counter and infect strategies. With a squad of Planeswalkers on our side of the battlefield, Deep Glow Skate can come into play and effectively end the game by doubling the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. In this instance, doubling our Planeswalkers' loyalty counters allows us to activate numerous ultimate abilities. Speaking of ultimate abilities, a strategy of crafting a Planeswalker build that uses Planeswalkers whose starting loyalty is at least half of their ultimate loyalty can be very powerful. When paired with the aforementioned counter-doubling effects of Doubling Season, Vorinclex Monstrous Raider, and Deep Glow Skate, these ultimate abilities can be activated much more quickly and much more frequently, which should lead to victory at the same rate. Although the plan is for each individual deck brewer to recruit members for their own version of Super Friends, we would be remiss if we did not mention some of the Planeswalkers that fit into this powerful mold. Each of the following Planeswalkers have powerful ultimate abilities that can be activated after doubling their starting loyalty. Nicol Bolas, God Pharaoh, exiles each non-land permanent controlled by our opponents. Liliana, Dread Horde General, forces each opponent to choose a permanent they control of each permanent type, and then they sacrifice the rest. Vraska, Relic Seeker, reduces a player's life total to 1, while Nicol Bolas, Dragon God, ends the game for each opponent who doesn't control a legendary creature or planeswalker. Some ultimate abilities create emblems, and at the current time, there are no ways to interact with these emblems. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, exiles target permanent whenever we draw a card. Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, counters each opponent's first spell each turn, while Narset Transcendent denies our opponents the ability to cast non-creature spells. Kaya the Inexorable lets us cast a legendary spell from our hand, graveyard, or exile, and without paying its mana cost. Since we're going to be slapping loyalty counters onto Planeswalkers like nobody's business, let's take advantage of this eventuality by including another win condition in the form of All Will Be One. Whenever we put one or more counters on a permanent or player, this enchantment deals that much damage to target opponent or a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. We will be able to manage the battlefield and deal damage directly to our opponents from the fundamental aspect of putting loyalty counters onto our planeswalkers. What amazing value. Let's bring this video to a close by adding some cards that synergize with and enhance our Planeswalker theme. Shalai, Voice of Plenty, gives us, Planeswalkers we control, and other creatures we control hexproof. As a bonus, she has an activated ability that puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. As a lot of Planeswalkers can create creature tokens, Shalai's ability to buff them provides a strong defense in addition to a potential win condition through combat. Urza Assembles the Titans is as heavy-hitting as a Planeswalker-specific card can be. The first lore counter of this saga scries 4, and then we may reveal the top card of our library. If it's a Planeswalker card, then we can reveal it and put it into our hand. Lore counter number 2 puts a Planeswalker card with mana value 6 or less from our hand right into play. When lore counter number 3 is placed on this saga, we may activate the loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers we control twice this turn, rather than only once. As a bonus, this saga has the Read Ahead mechanic, which allows us to choose how many lore counters to put on it when it enters the battlefield. The versatility of this enchantment provides a powerful array of different Planeswalker-centric abilities, as well as the flexibility to begin with whichever chapter we prefer. No Planeswalker commander deck should be without it. This video provided a blueprint for building the core of a Planeswalker commander deck around Kenrith the Returned King as its general. Other removal spells, disruption, ramp, and the land base can vary from build to build, and also are dependent on metagame preferences and availability. The cards discussed during this video are suggested options for constructing the core of a Planeswalker support deck without selecting any Planeswalkers. Planeswalker recruitment is up to you. Let me know your thoughts about these recommendations in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.